All right, welcome back to another episode of the Podium Pusher podcast. It has been a while, but we are finally back looking at each other on screen. You guys can see us. Brandon and I can see each other. This is incredible. If you're just listening, you still can't see us, but you're used to it, so that's okay. We just witnessed potentially the greatest British Grand Prix we've seen in a while, maybe even the greatest race of the season. It feels like we've been saying that for each of the last 7 races, but Formula One is truly spoiling us with definitely the greatest triple header we've seen. Brandon, this lovely Monday, we've had time to think about everything that happened in Great Britain. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. It was truly a fantastic race that had a lot of different things going on, and it's just incredible to watch a race and have literally no idea who's going to win it. Could have been any of the drivers that were in the top 5. So it was an incredible race, and yeah, this great time watching it.
It absolutely was an incredible race. There were moments throughout the whole Grand Prix that it looked like any one of the top 5 could have won. You had George leading from the flag, and then Lewis catching him, and then Lando and Oscar both getting by him, and then Max coming on strong at the end. There was even a second where Carlos Sainz was like 2 seconds behind Max Verstappen, and I was like, no shot, Carlos Sainz, get back into this. It truly was an incredible Grand Prix. As always, if you guys enjoy what we're doing here at the Podium Pushers, we would love for you guys to follow, subscribe. It's completely free. You can even get 5 of your friends to follow and subscribe as well. We're on YouTube, on all the social media platforms. With that out of the way, Brandon, what is your 1-sentence rundown from this Grand Prix?
My 1-sentence rundown, truly potentially the best race I've ever seen. And I say that because it featured so many different elements. Like I said, we're 40 laps into the 52-lap race, and we still didn't know necessarily who was going to win the race, which is an incredible feeling when you're watching it. But it had, pit stop strategy, weather came into play. There was fighting all up and down the field. I felt like there were cars that were out of position. Nico Hulkenberg, we'll talk about him later, but another P6 finish. And you had the Williams cars up there as well. So, I mean, it was just I felt like every time I looked at, the timing sheet on the left, I was like, oh, wow, that's crazy. There's something that is amazing happening. So it was a great race, and that's just, really, really fun to watch. And I feel like I hadn't experienced that before as a Formula One fan watching a race live, being like, man, this is just wild.
Yeah, it was an absolutely insane race. The crazy thing was that for like the first 15 laps, nothing crazy really happened. I mean, George led from lights out and was kind of building a gap on Lewis, and they were running 1-2, and it kind of looked like things were holding station. And then immediately the rain hit, and it was like the perfect amount of rain, because we're kind of in this period of Formula One where the wet weather tires, they mean absolutely nothing. Nobody wants to run the extreme wets. Anytime it gets hard enough to use them, we're pretty much red flagging the race anyways. And so it's the perfect amount of rain to be like dry, still might be fastest. We don't know when the intermediate crossover period is. We saw Lewis chase down Jordan. So the weather was perfect. And then for it to go full intermediates and then to get back fully to dry, I mean, that was the perfect weather scenario for the Grand Prix. It made pit strategy. It made everything. Man, it truly was an absolutely incredible Grand Prix.
Yeah, and I agree with that. If it had just started, pouring down rain, then that wouldn't have been as fun to watch. And you even had some cars like Sergio Perez go on the inters early to make a gamble there. Sergio and Charles did, and then they were posting lap times that were like 25 seconds slower than everyone else, and that was crazy as well. And it was just wild.
Yeah, the Sergio Perez one made sense to me because he was still down in like P17, so it was like maybe see if this thing works and Max can make the pit if it works as well. The Charles one made absolutely no sense to me because he had a great start and was up to P8 and then passed Lance Stroll. So he's up into P7, going to keep making progress probably. I would assume he would be able to get past Nico Hulkenberg as well and race him way back into the high end of the points. And Ferrari's like, yeah, it's dry out. Let's put him on inters, and kind of ruined his race there for sure. But yeah, definitely a lot of pit strategy all over the place with the rain for sure.
Yeah, he came out of that pit stop in like P16 or 17, and I was like, why would you do that? Yeah, I mean, it just didn't make any sense at all. But
yeah, Ferrari is in an incredible form of looking like their 2017 self with the most absurd strategy calls again. So great run of form for whoever they've got on the pit wall. My one sentence rundown is kind of dissing another team. It's not Ferrari, it's McLaren, because they just keep leaving it out on the table. Both Lando and Oscar had opportunities to win this race, I feel like, and they kind of gave it away. I mean, there were a lot of points throughout the race where Oscar Piastri was the fastest car on track, and then his last pit stop strategy, they left him out too long, absolutely threw that away, pretty much signed him up for a P5. But even from Saturday, I think McLaren gave it away. There was no reason that they shouldn't have been the team with the front row lockout instead of Mercedes. And yes, all credit to Mercedes, great lap from both of the drivers. They've been having a great uptick in form, but McLaren were clearly the fastest package all weekend. And for them to walk away with P3 and P5, especially when Max Verstappen had damage, it just feels like they left something on the table there, which, you know, obviously a lot can happen in the race, and they ended up fighting their way up to having P1 and P2 when the rain started coming down. And then for them to end up P3 and P4 again, it's like, what are we doing? You know, there's no reason that they shouldn't have at least been a double podium, maybe even a 1-2. I think Lando probably should have been the driver to win that race, and he finished P3. It's just tough to see McLaren keep leaving points on the table, and it's not like they're an underdog anymore. Like, they should be this front-running team that operates like one, and they just keep leaving points on the table and not maximizing these weekends while they have the fastest car.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch them kind of compete now at the top when they haven't been there for a while. And, I think, again, it's just kind of maybe their experience or lack thereof showing. Whereas, you have guys like Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen who have been, Lewis has been waiting in the wings for an opportunity for 3 years now, 2.5, 3 years. And, one landed in his lap and he took it and ran with it. And he was able to take home the win and, qualify P2. McLaren just haven't been in that position in a long time. And so I think it's just difficult for them to kind of see what they need to do. But I think they are getting better. I think, this weekend and the way that Oscar and Lando were racing, I think was a little bit more team focused. And I think they did a better job than they have maybe, I don't know, last weekend or a few weekends ago. So it's like, I see them getting better. They're making marginal gains, but is it enough to, bring the fight to Red Bull, or should I say Max Verstappen in the Constructors' Champions?
Yeah, I'm sure the fight in the constructor standings is back on. I mean, they had another great haul of points, and it'll always be hard for Max to fight when he's up there by himself. But I think the gap might be too big in the driver's standings. I got to be honest with you, for Max Verstappen to finish in front of Lando Norris again somehow. I don't know. I don't understand how Max Verstappen pulled the P2 out in this race. I mean, the Red Bull was clearly the third fastest car pretty much all weekend long. And so for him to walk out with a P2 is insane. For him to extend his championship lead is insane. I think it might be too big at this point. I don't want to write anything off. It's Formula One. Crazier things have happened. Who knows what will happen when we come back from the summer break and what the cars will look like, what the teams will look like, all the things. But no, they're definitely not out of the Constructors' Championship for sure. And I almost feel like it's okay that McLaren are making these mistakes. Like, I don't want to excuse them, but they kind of have to learn somehow. It's been so long since they've been in this situation. It's been so long since personnel in that team have either fought at the front, or some of them have never fought at the front and learned how to be ruthless with strategy that'll get you in front of Max Verstappen and do all of these things. So I don't want to say that it's fine that they're making these mistakes, but it's going to help them learn. They're going to grow as a team, and we'll continue to see them fight, maybe even be more prepared for a full championship fight in 2025.
Yeah, and it's like, you think about these other teams. You think about Red Bull. Max has 61 career wins, and Sergio has won like 7 or 8 races in his career. So I mean, you're looking at two drivers who have experience of fighting at the front. They've won 70 career races, and Lewis Hamilton has won like 104 races now, and George Russell has 2 under his belt. So like, you're fighting against teams with a lot of experience of racing at the front and winning races and that kind of thing. So it's like, the combined experience there with Lando and Oscar is still just one Grand Prix victory. So it's like these these gains that they're making are going to set them up for, next season. I can't even, 2025 is going to be crazy. It's going to be amazing. So they're just setting themselves up for success for next year, and it's going to be fun to watch. And I mean, again, not writing off the rest of the season for them this year, but I think, like, while they're not being as successful as they necessarily could be, it's helping them improve. So it's still fun to watch.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about how they're making these gains, and they still have such a young driver lineup and young, inexperienced leadership in some ways, and so growing pains are to be expected. And so I feel like we can't be too harsh on them, even though they are leaving some points out on the table. Let's move into our first question, which is, are Mercedes truly back in the Constructors' Championship fight? They have shown a massive improvement in pace. They've been on top of it with their strategies, with their pit calls. They've scored a massive haul of points over the last 2 races. Back-to-back wins for Mercedes, which is something I didn't think we were going to be saying at this point in the 2024 Formula One season. Are they too far back to make a run at the championship? Where do you think they can go from here?
I think Mercedes was still, even with just the Lewis win, I think they were still the team to score the most points this weekend. Correct me if I'm wrong. I could very well be wrong. But regardless, there was a lot of points they scored this weekend as well as last weekend too. I think if they keep making these games, and you have, Sergio Perez not scoring at all, I mean, they're going to be back in the fight here pretty quickly. Think about it in like 5-6 races. If these trends continue, then it'll be a really close fight at the top with McLaren, Mercedes, and Red Bull for the Constructors' Championship. But I don't think I think it's a little too early to say that Mercedes is for sure within reach of the Constructors' Championship. I think these trends have to continue, but I think it's possible for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna need like one more race to fully buy into this Mercedes pace, and I need it to be like a normal race. We've seen their pace in Canada where it was crazy. We saw their pace in Austria where George won, but he wasn't on for the win until that happened. And then this race was absolutely insane as well. And so I'm just gonna need to see like a normal Grand Prix, and if Mercedes have pace, then I'll fully buy into it. I'm not convinced that they'll be able to close that gap in the Constructors' Championship. Obviously, it's massive, but I've said this before and I still stand by it. I don't think they're going to finish P4. I think they're fully in that P2, P3 fight for sure. And I don't even want to write them off of the Constructors' Championship battle. Like, I know the gap is huge, but with Red Bull only having one car scoring and with the teams being as tight as they are, if they keep taking points off of each other and Mercedes are the team that consistently comes out on top in that mathematical equation of pieces coming together and who scores points where, then they could be back in that fight really quick. So I'm with you. I'm going to need to see some more evidence, but I'm not ready to write them off yet.
Again, just so fun to watch though, because Formula One hasn't been like this in a long time. Even in 2021, we had a great drivers' championship fight, but it wasn't like everybody else was close at the front of the field. It was just Max Lewis, really.
Yeah, for sure. I know that we're not convinced that we have, battles for drivers or constructors. We could easily see Max and Red Bull take both of them, but the fact that Formula One is as close as it is right now, and we've had 6 winners in the last 12 races. Yeah, I mean, even if we're not having an actual championship fight, I truly haven't seen Formula One in a better place in my whole time as a fan. So I'm happy.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to our next question. Was this the final straw for Sergio Perez? I think this race, it was extremely obvious that it was Max fighting up there on his own versus both Mercedes until George Russell sadly retired and both McLarens. Sergio Perez was out in Q1, and it was just brutal. He was on an out lap, and he put that thing in the gravel and was out in Q1. Never felt like he was challenging for points in the Grand Prix. I know that he went on intermediates early, but he wasn't making much progress before then, and then proceeded to make pretty much no progress throughout the rest of the race. Can Red Bull win with just Max? Do they need a second driver? Do they need to make a change? Was this the final straw for Sergio Perez?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I've been seeing more and more rumors swirling that Sergio could be out, and the rumors that I'm seeing are saying that Daniel Ricciardo would be the one to replace him. And I think that would be incredible. I think if Red Bull truly wants to kind of take the pressure off the team, they need to find somebody who can consistently score. And I think Daniel Ricciardo would be a great option. He's, a great driver, and I think he would, be totally fine being in that second seat in Red Bull and understanding that, hey, I'm here to race at the front, but not necessarily challenge Max to the point at which it's, detrimental to Max's championship fight. But also he's ready to be there to pick up the wins when he needs to. So those are the rumors that I'm hearing, and I think it's a real possibility. I mean, Sergio this weekend, was a prime opportunity for him to kind of get back on the horse and get, score some good points, finish the race well. It's a track that, Red Bull has performed well in at the past, and, he has performed decently well in at the past, and he couldn't do it.
Yeah, the whole Red Bull driver family rumor mill has been all over the place over the last couple of weeks. We've heard Daniel Ricciardo out at the summer break and Liam Lawson in, and then Daniel Ricciardo out at the end of the year, and then Daniel Ricciardo safe for the future. And then we've obviously seen Sergio Perez get re-signed, and then it was Sergio Perez maybe out at the summer break, and then it's Sergio Perez ultimatum, could be replaced before 2025. It's all over the place. I don't know what to believe, but I think Red Bull cannot comfortably win with just Max at this point. Obviously, last year they could. Max could have won the Constructor Championship all on his own. He had that points tally for it, but with 4 teams fighting at the front, maybe even 5 if Aston Martin can figure it out. Obviously, they had an improved weekend, but I don't want to throw them in there yet. But they could keep taking points off Sergio Perez, I guess. But, with all these teams fighting at the front and just being able to score points, and Sergio Perez, on his best day, it's looking like P8 is going to be like a win for Sergio Perez, which is just tough. And so I think there definitely needs to be a change within that team. I don't know if it needs to be at the summer break or at the end of the year, but I don't think Red Bull can comfortably keep having the level of success they want to have with Sergio Perez in that second seat.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, it's interesting to watch the narrative of what Christian Horner has been saying when asked about it. Because that seems like that's the only thing that Christian Horner's been asked about this weekend. But he this weekend he said it with Sergio not scoring that it's becoming unsustainable. So when you start to see, I think Christian Horner publicly say those things, that's a good indicator of something's actually going to happen. Because the rumor mills around F1 are crazy. And nothing is for sure until it's confirmed, as we learned with Oscar Piastri last year. But so for me, I think seeing Christian Horner say that, this is unsustainable, Sergio's under a lot of pressure, he knows that, blah, blah, blah. I think that's an indicator that, okay, the pressure is really there, and that there's been conversations that are we need to see something a little bit more than P16 and P17. So
yeah, it is just an absolutely horrendous run of form from Sergio Perez. I saw something this morning that says there was an ultimatum that he needs to be within 100 points in 5 World Drivers' Championship positions of Max Verstappen by the summer break, or he's gone. Completely no source to that rumor at all, but would be very interesting because I almost don't think he's going to meet those standards by the summer break. So let's see what happens.
It's crazy to say that, but I think that's a tall task to accomplish.
I think he's going to be P8 in the driver's standings before we know it.
Yeah. He's already P6?
Yeah, I think so.
P7?
Yeah, it's crazy. All right, moving on to our next question. Are Ferrari officially out of the championship? More bad luck for Charles Leclerc, knocked out in Q2, and poor strategy from the team during the Grand Prix, taking him out of a points-playing position. Carlos Sainz couldn't really get any higher than P5 during the race. Ferrari were clearly the 4th fastest car, never really on for any kind of podium finish, much less a win. are they out of this Constructors' Championship fight? I think they're for sure out of the Drivers' Championship fight with Charles Leclerc, but where did Ferrari go from here?
It's interesting. Ferrari, I mean, this really felt like the year that this wasn't going to happen. But here we are, a couple of races away from the summer break. And, I think they're definitely out of the Drivers' Championship fight. Charles has just slipped back too much. He's had a lot of bad luck where drivers like Lando and George have had a lot of, really good luck and great races. And it seems like the Ferrari upgrades aren't really working. And so my indicator would be, I think, the car doesn't seem to be improving. So I think they're out of the championship fight. Whereas all the other cars around them, Mercedes, McLaren, do seem to be improving. And I don't think Ferrari is really capable of winning a race right now if all those other cars are where they're at. So unless something crazy happens at the front.
Yeah, tough place to be for Ferrari right now. I feel like Charles Leclerc just used every ounce of his luck for like the next 5 seasons apparently to get his home win in Monaco. But man, it's just tough to see what is happening to Charles Leclerc right now. I mean, from second in the driver's standings to where he is right now. I mean, Carlos Sainz is performing well, but for him to be like 5 points back from his teammate when he missed a Grand Prix just shows how much bad luck and poor strategy that Charles Leclerc really has had. But yeah, I think Ferrari are clearly out of it. And I don't know what happened. It felt like they won Monaco and things were looking great. And then immediately they were like the 4th fastest car and making mistakes and upgrades didn't work. And it's just been bad since then.
Yeah, it's truly a strange thing. I feel like, at least since I've been a fan of Formula One, I've never seen a team or a car drop off that quickly. And, after Canada happened, it was like, all right, Ferrari just had a bad weekend. Canada is obviously a very different track than Monaco. So, like, maybe it makes sense that the car would perform well in Monaco and, not so well in Canada. But, here we are several races after that, and the car is still just as bad as it was in Canada. And, I don't know. It's crazy. I have no explanation for it, and I sure hope Ferrari has more of an explanation than I do.
Yeah, well, it sounds like they don't right now because it looks like they're pretty stumped, and if they had an explanation, they'd probably turn it around if they could, but it is what it is.
Maybe it's just time to focus on, what can we do to get Adrian Newey?
Yeah, they're tanking to get more wind tunnel time for when Adrian Newey comes. They can test out his new car. That's it. We figured it out. That's what's happening with Ferrari right now. It's all on purpose. Next year, Lewis Hamilton, Ferrari world champion. You heard it here first.
That'd be wild. Yeah, not out of the realm of possibility, but it'd be crazy.
That would be absolutely insane. All right, let's quickly run through some other notable moments from this Grand Prix, starting with George Russell's heartbreak. Pole to DNF. It just hurt to watch. He was in control of that race from the beginning. When the rain started to fall, Lewis Hamilton caught up to him. It appeared to be the faster Mercedes, but I think had it gone dry at the end and George Russell had still been there, I think he would have been within a shout for the win. He was clearly the faster Mercedes driver in the dry, and so, man, that one just hurts to see him just retire like that as home Grand Prix, especially after having such a great weekend.
Yeah, that was heartbreaking, and George has been driving so well recently, and, I've said this 1,000 times, but I love to watch drivers be successful at their home Grand Prix, and George he had control of the race for the first 15 laps, and then, eventually he retired, and it was kind of a strange retirement. It wasn't immediately clear what was wrong with the car. I mean, it seemed like he was totally fine, and then he got, the call from the pit lane to come in and retire the car, and ultimately, I guess it was, a water system issue, which I guess could affect a lot of different things on the car. But yeah, it's really sad for George, and I think it would have been, it likely would have been a all British podium had George not retired, which would have been cool to see. But
yeah, it definitely has to hurt for him. Nico Hülkenberg, another P6. Audi seem to be really liking the man they've got for next year. I know it'll still be Sauber and the team will still probably be slow as heck, but if they get him a fast car when they become Audi, might be a little move. Maybe Nico Hülkenberg breaks his podium streak, but massive haul of points for Haas again. They've been moving up the constructors standings, getting them back in the fight with RB and Aston Martin. So great weekend for Haas, and good for Nico Hülkenberg to bring home another P6.
Yeah, that's a really impressive drive from Nico. I mean, he qualified really well, and I think even as I was like watching broadcast, listening to the broadcast, they were kind of talking about how, oh yeah, Nico's probably going to slip back here. Maybe he'll grab, P10 to P8 maybe, but P6 finish was fantastic. Good calls on, I guess, strategy for Haas and making sure Nico got the tires that he needed when he needed them, and it was a great race from Nico. He always seems to kind of pull something out of nowhere, which is really cool.
Yeah, definitely one of the best midfield drivers, and so I truly would love to see him get to have a car that he can fight at the front with. A really big weekend for the midfield overall. Williams, Aston Martin, Haas, and RB all scored points this weekend. So not only is the fight close at the front, the fight at the midfield is getting extremely tight as well. I would love for us to be able to go into the end of the season and have a fight for P5 in the Constructors' Championship. But great weekend from Aston Martin, turning it around after a couple tough weekends. Obviously, Haas got the big haul of points with Nico Hülkenberg. Williams looked strong with both the drivers. Great result for Alex Albon to bring home 2 points, but Logan Sargent, P11, is nothing to scoff at as well. So great weekend for a lot of midfield teams.
Yeah, it was fun to watch. Like I kind of said earlier, it was like every time I look at the timing sheet on the left, no matter who the broadcast is actually following on the screen, it was like, oh, there's Nico up there, there's Alex and Logan are up there. So it was a fun race to watch, and having that fight for the midfield positions is also going to make the end of the season that much more exciting, because each position is like so important. I think a lot of people are like, oh yeah, it doesn't really matter P8 versus P6 in the Constructors' Championship. Like, the team shouldn't really care about that. But no, that's like millions and millions of dollars for them to develop the next year's car. So it's really important to them, and it makes it exciting for us to watch.
Absolutely. Brandon, who was your podium pusher of the weekend this time out in Great Britain?
My podium pusher of the weekend, we mentioned them briefly, but I'm going to say Williams. Both Alex and Logan had great weekends. Logan just missed out on Q3. He was pretty close in qualifying. Alex obviously made it through, qualified P9, finished racing P9, picked up a couple of important points for Williams. Logan, so close to his first on-track points finish. We got to see his first points finish in Austin last year, finishing P11, but eventually getting bumped up to score a point, or P12, I think it didn't score a point. But anyway, it was a great weekend from them. They seemed to really be on it. Their livery was amazing. I think that was a really cool livery with the British flag on the car, and they had like 1,000 names of people who had past in the present who had like helped build their car and get Williams to where it is today. So that was really cool. A nice tribute to the team and the Williams family. So it was really awesome to see them be successful. And James Fowles in his interview after the race seemed definitely pleased with how they did during the weekend. So they're my podium pushers.
Absolutely massive weekend for Williams. Obviously, Alex Albon scoring points, and Logan Sargent is no longer P21 in a 20-driver championship with that P11 finish. So let's go. Good job, Logan. My podium pusher of the weekend, none other than Lewis Hamilton. It has to be his first front row start of the season and bringing home a glorious win for the first time since 2021. It has been like 950 days or something since his last win. Man, I almost got emotional at the end seeing him get emotional. Obviously, he got a little choked up on the radio immediately after the win, and then in all his post-race interviews was crying and said to himself he couldn't stop crying. And so Lewis Hamilton, great weekend all around. Incredible to see him have this success again, which is something that I never thought that I would say as a Formula One fan. But yeah, to see him win his home Grand Prix, his last home Grand Prix with Mercedes, it was truly special, and he is my podium pusher of the weekend.
Yeah, that's a great choice. I mean, and you predicted him to win the race last week on our episode, which is amazing. And he did it. And just watching him get out of the car and like hug his dad, I was getting emotion too. I was like, man, it truly couldn't have been better, written better. A victory in his last home Grand Prix with Mercedes, a track that he's won at now 9 times, which is a record as well. It's 104th win. I mean, it's just crazy. And, it was 150th podium with Mercedes too. It just seems like this win provided so many different numbers or records or stats that are just wild. Again, I'm right there with you. I never thought I would want Lewis to be successful at his home Grand Prix, but it was fun to watch and a special moment for a driver who is truly great.
Yeah, absolutely incredible moment just to be a Formula One fan and to get to witness that. Not to flex, but I did predict the entire podium correctly for the British Grand Prix, so that's a good one right there. Brandon, who is your back marker of the weekend?
My back marker of the weekend, I went with somebody who was kind of really nowhere all weekend. That would be Valtteri. Valtteri Bottas. His highest finishes, of course, the weekend were FP1 and FP2 with a P12. Not great. He qualified P16, and I believe that's where he finished the race as well. He may have finished P15. But yeah, it was just kind of a weekend of running around at the back of the field for Valtteri. And, if he wants to drive next year, I'm just not sure that these performances are going to be the ones that are going to get him a seat, but we'll see.
Yeah, tough weekend overall for Stake, being that midfield team with Alpine and not score points. That's tough, but it was almost kind of surprising to see Valtteri Bottas struggle. You feel like with him being a finished driver, that a slippery track is something that he would really excel at, and then he got qualified by his teammate, which is always tough to see when your teammate is Guan Yu Zhou, and then to not have a great race either and not make up any positions in the tricky mixed conditions. I definitely would have expected a better weekend from Valtteri for sure. My back marker of the weekend was Alpine. They messed up Esteban's strategy in qualifying and the race, so there was no shot of him scoring points. Pierre Gasly wasn't even able to start the Grand Prix, had to retire before the race even began. And then to be one of the only 2 midfield teams to not score points, with Haas, RB, Williams, and Aston Martin bringing home points this weekend, that's got to hurt for sure. They had been making some strides over the past few weekends scoring points, and it looking like they were getting back into the midfield fight, and then this weekend was just a horrendous weekend for them, so they have got to be my back markers.
Yeah, it's a great choice. It just was not a good weekend for them in a weekend that I think was really important. They had a good weekend because, like you said, it looks like they were kind of getting back in the fight and they were going to be in the mix, and then they just were nowhere, and throw a crazy race with mixed conditions on top of that, and it just kind of took them out of contention, which is unfortunate to see, but hopefully we'll turn it around, get back on track next time out.
I'm sure they will. Brandon, let's recap our predictions for this Grand Prix. What were your 2 predictions for this Grand Prix, and how'd they turn out?
My prediction didn't turn out great, but I said that all 3 British drivers are going to finish in top 5. We were looking so good for that until George retired. Obviously, he finished at the very back of the pack because of that. And then I said neither Ferrari driver finishes in the top 5, which Carlos Sainz got a P5. So basically, this is all George's fault. I would have gotten both predictions right had George not retired. So it is really unfortunate, but it's okay. They were good predictions, and had George not had a water system issue, we'd be looking at me as the hero here. So
yeah, it was unfortunate that George retired. I was like, it's raining out. Just there's enough water in the air. Keep him out there, see what happens. But no, he unfortunately had to retire. Not only ruined his race, but also ruined your predictions. My first prediction was that neither Aston Martin driver would reach Q3, which they did. Both of them reached Q3. Bounce back weekend from Aston Martin. Shout out them. First weekend they've had in a while where both drivers have been in the points, so good for them. But not great for me because that prediction was incorrect. My second prediction was that at least 3 special liveries would be out for the weekend, and that one did come true. We had Williams run their special livery, as well as Red Bull and RB. And I know RB was just on the wheel covers, but I'm counting it. So that prediction was correct for me.
Yeah, it was a decent weekend for predictions, even though the score didn't show it. I still feel good about my predictions. They were decent.
Yeah, I feel great about the predictions, not those, but the fact that in our last podcast I predicted the podium correctly.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, it was fantastic. Yeah.
What are your parting podium thoughts before we leave these lovely people?
It was an amazing triple header. I'm excited for the last couple of races before the summer break. I think we've got Hungary and Spa, I believe, and those are going to be great tracks. I think Spa is going to be an amazing race. It's a fantastic track. It's one of the longer ones on the calendar, and rain is usually a factor there as well. So looks like all the ingredients are an amazing race. So it's going to be awesome to watch a couple more races before the end of before the summer break hits. So I'm excited.
I know. I can't wait for that shot of 4 different teams going down the Kimmel Strait side by side to see who's going to be leading after lap 1. That is going to be absolutely incredible once we get to Spa. Yeah, I'm kind of sad that the end of this triple header is upon us. It has been great having Formula One every Sunday morning for the past 3 weeks, but that's all right. We'll take a week off and we'll be back at it in Hungary, and Formula One is not going anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, that is all we have got for the 2024 British Grand Prix. Thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of the Podium Pushers podcast. As always, like, subscribe, comment, follow us wherever you are watching or listening. You can find us on YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you find your podcasts, and we will see you in the next one.
See you guys.